I think that's an interesting question. I serve on the Light Factory board, so we've kind of gone through a little bit of this ourselves. And with the Light Factory, we decided that we trust our executive director. So I think I would probably lean towards that method as well. So the former of your options there, to where we're hiring the superintendent to be the leader, to be the face of the school system. So I would think that we would need to place some trust in that person so that they can come up with their policies. They're going to hire the staff below them, and so we need to trust what they're doing on that. But yeah, with absolutely proper oversight over that, because I think we're going to have our 9 opinions on there, and having an agreement about 9 people is going to be difficult. I think we can all understand that. So I think it's going to be incumbent, even if I'm a lone person on that, to say, I'm not so sure about this, or I think this is really good, and you guys don't, kind of a thing. So I think it is our part as a school board to be active about that oversight, and not just say, okay, yeah, that looks good, yes, I trust you, but to also ask those questions of that superintendent so that we're comfortable with the direction that they're going.
Lisa Call.
Hi.
Any other follow-up? You'll be, if the new board will be doing a superintendent search. If you could have anybody in the country, who or what kind of person would you pick and why?
Wow, good question. I think I agree with some of the sentiment that I've heard from the board and from some of the public comments that I think we ought to look for a superintendent that has that education background. We've seen in, I believe, Wake County and some other places where they've hired a business person or a non-education person. And I think there's merit there with that kind of an outside or different voice. But I think from what I see where the school system is at right now, I do think that somebody with a good education background or a solid education leadership background would be probably our better choice of going through that. I think a superintendent who has the good leadership skills, I made a mention the other day of the terminology of the servant leadership. So it's something that I learned a number of years ago that I completely believe in, which is if I'm going to lead, I'm also going to do. I'm not just going to sit here in my chair and say, go do that, go do that. But somebody who's going to get their hands dirty, if you will, and be an active part of the things that are going on within the system. So somebody who's that kind of a leadership role. I like somebody who's adaptable, because we know our situations are going to change. Things could happen next week. There could be another court ruling. There could be all sorts of things that might come about. And I think having a leader or superintendent who's willing to say, okay, here's the curveball that was thrown at me. How can I adjust to that and take what I want to do and figure out a way to get there, maybe through a different path, or maybe I have to adjust my angle on how I'm going to get there a little bit. So the adaptability is another part in there. And then I think another key part is responsibility. I learned this in my job real quickly, 13 years ago, that if I screw up and I make a mistake, it's my fault. I'm going to take responsibility for that. And if I stand up and I take responsibility, then people understand that. And then we can put that aside and figure out where we're going to go next. So I think the superintendent definitely is going to be the buck stops here kind of a person. So somebody who's going to be willing to take that responsibility and say, yeah, we screwed up. Or, okay, here's how we're going to fix that. Yes, these mistakes were made. And not just play the games or the political games, if you will.
How many of our former superintendents do you have some familiarity with? How many of them?
How many of them? There was Dr. Gorman, and then well, there was, oh gosh, I can't remember his name, Pewsley?
Yes.
And then Eric Smith was here when we first got here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think there was an interim between him
yes.
and James. So,
would you hire any of them?
You know, I did not know, I did not, and I'll admit I didn't pay a lot of close attention to what Eric Smith did. I would be curious, because it seems like he still has a pretty decent reputation on some things. I know he did some controversial stuff. I kind of liked a lot of what Dr. Gorman did, except for that last year when he pulled that little legislation piece out of his hat, kind of unknown to everybody else in the world. But before that, I think the way he approached the teachers for the most part, the way he was handling the press for the most part, he had a lot of good characteristics about him. So I would certainly have him in a consideration. I don't know if he would be a final choice.